Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back in another video from Annie News, checking out another cut content video for ReZero Season 3. This week's episode was a bit, not too much going on. A little bit more groundwork, setting up for things going on. We learn what happened to certain people. Subaru's got a really interesting thing going on with his leg. Yeah, let's see what was left out.
Subaru got pretty lucky here. Rez Krush got turned into some apparent abomination,
Which we didn't quite see, yeah.
Subaru instead gained an enhanced mutated leg far stronger than it was before.
Yeah, that was weird.
He's kinda like Emiya from Heaven's Feel now. It's a bit too early to say whether this buff is here to stay, but for now it looks like Subaru will be making the most of it.
I still need to watch the Heaven's Feel. I've seen the first Heaven's Feel, but I haven't seen the second or third one. But anyway.
As for what it is, well, that's what we're gonna talk about here.
Cool, alright.
An apparent curse currently at odds with the existing curse already inside him. We'll go over that, then the details we didn't get to see from Subaru's adventure with Liliana and Priscilla. A lot of Priscilla's charm didn't make it into the anime.
God damn, she's so capable, isn't she? Jesus Christ.
Episode 56, Conditions of the Night, covering chapters 1 to 3 from volume 18 of the light novel. Subaru's opening scene was actually pretty interesting since, in comparison to the cryptic description we got in the novels, the way they visualized it here was amazing.
It did look pretty cool. It did look like a complete conflict. And now that you'd mentioned it, it makes sense, yeah. It's like two things fighting over control, isn't it?
We actually got to see the Curse of the Beast duke it out with the Curse of the Dragon. To describe it the way that the novel did, though, the only thing Subaru could hear was all sorts of voices echoing in the distance.
Damn.
Whether it be a battle cry, a grieving wail, a scream, or a sob, noises of every kind rained down around him.
Yeah.
They swirled his head like some kind of vortex. If he had to explain it any way he could, to Subaru it was like someone he'd met after a long time was now opening up about everything, swallowing him whole in an unrelenting flood of noise. Eventually, such noise started to make him lose track of where he even was, then after that, his entire sense of self started to blur together. Who he was no longer felt distinct as countless voices overwhelmed his very being. Those voices then became dark and stagnant, almost like they were trying to break down his identity next. It was as if they were trying to reduce him down to nothing. So, the more those voices overwhelmed him, the more Subaru sunk into that darkness, and the less he was able to resist the progressive deterioration of everything that was him.
That's a lot going on. Jesus Christ.
It was right as he was about to resign himself to that darkness that a thread bound around his core would reject it. Something deep inside him refused to stop fighting even when Subaru had. It was actively going against the darkness, trying to throw him into nothingness. So, as these two mysterious forces fought to claim ownership over the self that was Subaru, each tried to kill the other, all so that they could take Subaru for themselves. The novel never described what those two were, but as we'll soon find out, one is the Curse of the Beast while the other is the Curse of the Dragon.
That's cool.
It's an interesting way of highlighting these two supernatural forces now currently dwelling within Subaru. Switching over to when Subaru was saved by Priscilla, a lot of her most arrogant lines were cut to get to other things. For as conceited as she was in the anime, the novel makes her 10 times worse.
Oh, okay.
This actually works towards building her charm though, since there's some pretty banger lines highlighting just how witty she is. I mean, when you have her suggesting Subaru spoon out his own eyes for being useless, you get to see that this is a whole separate level of pompousness.
Damn. Jeez. And the way she pulls the sword out and that, she could easily be like a fake character. She could be a summon, you know what I mean?
Now, if you're wondering how it is Priscilla had
Spoon
even
out your
found
eyes.
Subaru, well, it was as she was on her way to execute the person responsible for flooding the city that she would notice a certain commoner floating downstream.
Ah.
We know she was also looking for her retainer Schult too, but to her the crime of defiling the city like this was unforgivable. So much so that she was on her way to bestow her own suitable punishment. Liliana just so happened to stay close since Priscilla was competent, but that's essentially what these two were up to. When they switched their focus to Subaru's leg, what was revealed underneath was this revolting pitch-black ligament that no longer hurt.
Hey.
It was a feat impossible through any sort of healing magic, since as far as the principles for that went, it simply increased the natural recovery ability of a patient's body, not regenerate limbs like what had happened here. So, rather than the gentle power all his allies used so proudly, This grafted abomination was a desecration of everything healing magic stood for. It spit in the face of the miracle Felix, Beatrice, Garfield, and even Rem all shared so willingly. Now, aside from Priscilla's shockingly callous experimentation on Subaru,
Yeah, she's like, oh, wow, okay, that heals. Oh, no, that doesn't. Never mind.
the result of it reminded him that this had something to do with dragon blood. It was a reveal that led to a discussion about what this could possibly mean for him. So, as soon as Priscilla heard it was caused by Capella sharing her blood, she instantly knew it was something akin to a curse. Reason being that, from what she knew from ritual practitioners up north, a rite such as this was actually quite common for curses. Whether it was a curse or not, though, if this was in fact the same dragon blood Liliana mentioned in her song, the miraculous nature of it made it seem like it could do anything. As for the other great treasures the Holy Dragon left alongside it, they were mentioned to be the Dragon Tablet and the Covenant. Two lore-heavy concepts I'm sure we'll see more of in the future. To keep the focus on Subaru, though, the fact his neck didn't heal the same way that his leg did put into question just how much of a treasure the dragon blood really was. Like, if this was all it could do, then Priscilla couldn't help but mock the legend this sacred dragon was supposedly known for.
It is odd, isn't it? It's like, it just gave him a new leg that heals. Like, hasn't affected, well, from what we see at the moment. I imagine there'll be something down the line where it goes, actually, haha. But, yeah, it's so strange. Just, you've got a leg that heals now. Nothing else. Everything else still gonna bleed out.
This was an insult Liliana didn't take too kindly, since despite her non-confrontational nature, mocking the dragon was unacceptable. As
Mock
a
the
bard whose
dragon.
job was
I instantly heard rock the dragon, but it was mock the dragon. Mock the dragon. Mock the dragon. Sorry.
to sing and preserve the legends of the past. The Holy Dragon, who had the greatest legend of them all, was pretty much their biggest benefactor.
Right.
It was essentially the one thing keeping them all employed. It's for that reason such slander wouldn't be tolerated, so in order to get Priscilla to retract her words, Liliana would request she cut off Subaru's head immediately.
Whoa.
Since all this
They really have left out some aggressive lines, haven't they?
was just a simple matter of disbelief. To prove Priscilla wrong and verify the veracity of the Dragon Blood's power, all she needed to do was watch the Dragon Blood reattach Subaru's head to his body. Obviously, Subaru objected, but an interaction like this was a nice comedic moment after all that intense stuff with Capella. That said, the main thing to take away was that healing was limited to Subaru's leg. Whether it's because of true dragon blood remains to be seen, but this wasn't the time for experimentation. Now, when discussing the flood the archbishops supposedly used as punishment, if it was in fact meant to be retaliation, then Priscilla found it to be rather half-hearted. If these archbishops were even half as evil as everyone made them out to be, then she was fully expecting something even more despicable.
Like worse,
The fact
right?
that this was all they did, though, indicated to her that they likely valued their demands far more than causing suffering right now. Even so, at the end of the day, this still was another one of Subaru's failures. Had this been a younger version of himself, then back-to-back L's like this would have made him fall into despair for sure. I mean, he'd died to Sirius 3 times over, let Amelia get kidnapped by Regulus, had Beatrice fall into a coma, got toyed with by lust, then
Oh, goddamn, yeah, we're racking him up. He's had a lot of L's here. Oh, Subaru, mate.
let the city be flooded out of retribution for his own actions.
Yeah, Subaru, come on.
So, to him it was truly pathetic how little he'd accomplished. It's even after all that, though, that Subaru was still committed to pushing forward. If he was to compare it to what he went through during the witches' trials, all this was still nothing. It wasn't nearly enough to make him give up yet. That's when the three of them would get jumped by demi-beasts, which were a fundamentally different type of monster from demon beasts. As incomplete monsters from birth, it was only fitting to refer to them as such.
They do look strange. Like, the colour scheme does match the baddie girl with the pink, though.
Combine this with their inherent
That reminded me of something, but I couldn't quite think of it. Like, the way... Maybe something from, like, Evangelion? With the head and that, and... Maybe,
inherently flawed designs, and what you get are creations made as if to mock the living. Their obvious defects were a clear indication that this was what their creator was going for. Luckily, this meant they were usually missing one or more of their senses, so that made dealing with them a whole lot easier. That said, they were still formidable enough monsters to take out civilians. So it was after Priscilla eliminated them
So
with
cool.
unexpected precision that there was a cutscene involving Subaru finding a civilian.
Oh.
He would rush over and perform the first aid Clint had taught him, stopping the bleeding and creating a splint for him.
Nice!
He would then carry this civilian back to a shelter, bringing us to this crucial scene with Liliana.
That's so odd that they cut that out. That would be a perfect segue into that, and Subaru would be doing something.
A quick interesting thing to note before that, though, is this peculiar statement Priscilla made to Subaru before the shelter.
Again, you really do seem to be
He
a man
didn't
with
understand
good
what she
timing.
meant by it, but I imagine it's because he has a tendency to show up when it matters most.
Yeah, just at the right time.
Like,
yeah.
if not for being saved by Priscilla or even coming across this injured civilian, Subaru never would have been able to find out that Sirius's authority was affecting everyone in the city. As for when he figured that out himself, the first hint was the frustration he started feeling towards Priscilla's indifference here. Since she was clearly unaffected by everyone's suffering, that level of disregard just didn't sit right with him. Her arrogant self-confidence had become so unbearable that all he wanted to do now was rip off the mask that she was hiding behind. This obviously wasn't how Subaru normally felt, so that ultimately led to his realization that this was
Not
rap.
going to say where my mind
If
was
you're
going
wondering why Priscilla remained unaffected herself, well, her ego was so strong and sympathy for others so non-existent that to Subaru he felt the sharing of emotions was practically impossible for her. It was the only reasonable explanation that could justify her resistance to it. Now, seeing it affect all these people down here also helped Subaru realize his understanding of it was far too simple. What I mean is that before, Sirius explained her authority as a power allowing people to understand each other, but after seeing this, Subaru knew it was a power that forced people to isolate themselves. With the way its resonance strengthened when more people were around, it was only natural people would start to avoid each other once fear and unease took over. So if the first instinct of everyone was to remain alone, then there was really no fellowship behind Sirius's power at all. Luckily, Liliana's music resonated with people's very souls, stealing their hearts back and returning it to them. It was a power she was well aware she possessed, making it extremely convenient that Priscilla just so happened to be going from shelter to shelter. This left Subaru with a whole new sense of motivation, since by knowing he could trust these two to defuse the situation at all the shelters, it allowed him to focus on taking on the main problems.
Like, it's really cool as well. It just goes into song, and the woman can actually like sing proper, and that doesn't seem out of place either. You know, sometimes where like it just randomly bursts into songs and that, like it's like, where the fucking hell does that come from? But yeah, it doesn't bother me at all whenever a song starts kicking off, because it's a whole like thing, it's a whole stick.
So, although so much had gone wrong already, Subaru was committed to turning everything around no matter what. Now, if you're wondering why Priscilla was searching for Schult, it's because he was a retainer that she actually valued. Al she knew could take care of herself, but Schult was someone she felt personally responsible for. His charm was also something she deemed irreplaceable, so finding him was on the top of her list of priorities. This brings us now to Subaru's encounter with the demi-beasts, which, through lots of running, went to prove his right leg was far better than he could have ever imagined. He could feel it was way more fit than it ever was before. In fact, when a beast had cornered him and charged right at him, Subaru was actually able to jump right over it. Unfortunately, he'd get surrounded by two more, but that was when Julius would intervene to save him. A little recap would then piece together how the fight went on his end, finishing up with the Flood providing the opportunity for escape. Based on how the fight was going prior to it, the Flood was really more of a blessing than a hindrance.
I really want to know how these fights ended up. We need to find out. I hope the next episode goes back and we see what happened with these.
Reason being that it's highly likely they would have incurred casualties had the fight gone on longer. So this was yet another instance where the Flood seemed rather odd, adding to the mystery behind who could have possibly done it. It was just super weird since there were far more benefits for them than there was for the witch cult. Fast forward now to City Hall, and Felix's breakdown would be far more emotional than what we saw. Ricardo had actually had to hold him back, even bare his fangs since Felix's abuse was unacceptable.
Damn.
Felix would then drop to the ground and claw the floor,
I always forget Felix is a bloke, but...
all while verbally abusing Wilhelm and Ricardo. It was after this that self-loathing would overcome everything else, since if his healing was useless in the time that it mattered most, then what was the point of having all this power to begin
Yeah,
with?
why?
To him, being the country's best healer meant absolutely nothing right now. It was a title that probably just made his burdens even heavier. If he couldn't even save the person that was most important to him, then Felix couldn't help but feel worthless. He and everyone else couldn't do anything but regret their own weaknesses right now. Julius was no exception either, since his failure weighed heavily on him too. By not being able to defeat the opponents Subaru trusted him to take care of, he was being a lot more apologetic and even anxious. It was so apparent and so out of character that both Subaru and Ricardo would have to scold him. Such words made Julius wonder whether Subaru even knew what fear meant at all, to which Subaru would state his mindset is because he did know fear. He knew it all too well, and it's for that reason he worked hard to ensure he'd never experience it again.
He's experienced fear, and he's experienced some suffering.
So, despite Subaru being painfully aware of everything that went wrong, it's his reflection on those failures that make it possible to keep moving forward. Reason being that, to him, the scariest thing in the world was losing the connection shared with someone precious. To no longer be able to wish for the same experiences they once envisioned.
Yeah, Rem's been out of faction for ages now,
that was far scarier than anything else. So long as there were still things that they could do, Subaru told Julius that they just needed to keep trying. All messing up meant was that they needed to make up for it by taking action. One failure shouldn't be enough to stop any of them. This would be where Subaru would start his conversation with Anastasia, but considering the massive chunk that was left out from that, I'm gonna combine that with Amelia's scenes for a part 2 video.
Oh.
The key thing I want to focus on to end this one is the exaggerated feelings each character displayed as soon as Subaru entered City Hall.
It's amazing how much can actually be cut out. Like I was saying, this episode is more of a recapping where everyone is, what happened, sowing a little bit of seeds for next one, but then there's so much left out that Annie News wants to do 2 videos on it. It's very interesting.
Like, Felix felt regret far greater than he'd felt before. Wilhelm wallowed in self-doubt and self-reproach.
What happened to
Ricardo
Wilhelm?
bore his fangs out of indignation and annoyance.
Wilhelm, what
Julius
did you do?
Was filled with doubt.
Who was she?
The
woman you were fighting?
Every person was acting in a way Subaru would consider abnormal. This was because they were all bearing their hearts more, which was a direct result of Sirius's influence. Her authority was affecting those in City Hall too. Something you may have been able to pick up on had Wilhelm, Ricardo, and Julius' emotions been more apparent, but that was something the anime unfortunately left out. But yeah, that's half of what we missed from episode 6.
Just half?
I'll finish the other half with another video on Wednesday, but until then, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, then feel free to leave a like and comment. Now, before I go, just a reminder that I've re-released new and improved versions of the Succubate shirts.
Hey, and it's Dan Matchy cut content as well. They've been pretty good. There's only been like 2, I think, but they cover some interesting things.
If you've ever wanted to get them before, then now is definitely the best time to. So be sure to check them out at succubate.shop. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do.
So until next time, ciao!
Ciao!
Very cool, very interesting. I love seeing the stuff that's left out. Like, I love knowing the whole story. But Wilhelm, man, like, what happened in the fight? Is it who we think it is? Is it? Yeah. Craziness. Love it. So we'll check out that part 2 when it comes out. And thank you very much for watching.
Click like.